Welcome, everyone, to the Success Elevated podcast. As always, I'm your host, Hayden Lee, and I'm joined this week by a very special guest, Justin Sifford, owner and partner of Wylander. Thanks again for coming on the podcast, Justin.
Hey, man, not a problem. Happy to be here. Happy to be part of this, Hayden.
Well, I sincerely appreciate it. I know you and your wife, Christy, I've heard awesome things about you guys from Katie and Derek. I haven't. I know you guys have been, a part of the Spot On Solutions family, I guess, for quite a while. But this is my first time to kind of get to sit down and pick your brain and talk to you a little bit. And so I'm super excited to have you. And I'm hoping at some time in the future I can have one of your famous meals at Captiva, because I hear it's spoken about in hushed tones throughout the restoration industry that you and your wife can make a mean meal. So I'm excited to sit down and talk with you.
Oh, no, yeah, thanks. Happy to chat.
Yeah, cool. So let's kind of dive in. Before every episode, I usually sit down with Katie and my boss here at Spot On Solutions, and we talk a little bit about every guest and what would be some good questions to talk about. Katie spoke to me a little bit about your background. So even before you and your wife started Wylander, talked a little bit about your career, and you helped run a flooring company or whatever it might be. So maybe speak a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, Justin, a little bit about your career and your experience, and what kind of led you to want to start Wylander with your wife, Christy.
Sure. Yeah. So, I didn't mean to end up in the business world. It was really by accident. I was a firefighter paramedic for about 10 years.
Awesome.
On my days off during that 10 years, I started working in the warehouse of a flooring company in Dallas, Fort Worth. And I just wanted to drive the forklift, and all firemen have two jobs. And that was kind of my gig, Didn't have a lot of responsibility. I'd show up, drive the forklift, load the crews. And this was my girlfriend at the time, and now my wife, Christy. This was her parents' flooring company. And her mom approached me. I don't know. I was working there a couple of months maybe. And she said, "Justin, have you ever thought about being in sales?" And I said, "No, I don't know anything about sales." I remember when I was a little kid, my best friend's dad is actually a very famous person down in South Texas, a ventriloquist. He said, "You want to make money in this world? Be in sales." A friend of mine sells encyclopedias door to door, and he makes more money than I do. And so I didn't know anything about sales. I was probably 19, 20 at the time. So she said, "Well, give it a try." And I did. And I hated it. I didn't feel that I was being authentic to people. I mean, I was making a lot of money very easily, which was very different for me. Being a firefighter paramedic, you kind of, risk your life in some scenarios for, at the time, what was I making? 32,000 a year.
Right.
So I didn't enjoy it. Resigned, actually, and went and did a OSHA safety job on my days off at the firehouse. That later, I ended up marrying Christy, and her parents said, "Hey, family business now, you should come back." And I was bored at the OSHA job. It was hot. Contractors hate OSHA, so they hated me, and so I went back into sales. Plus, we had a mortgage now, and life was getting real. I was married, and we were talking about starting a family. So I went back into sales. And after 9/11, my uncle worked for the FBI. And he said, "Justin, have you ever thought about working for the FBI?" And so, I'm still doing the fire department gig, and I'm selling flooring on the days off. And after 9/11, I'm out of his home, and he says, "We're going to hire 2,200 agents over the next few years. If you have your college degree, maybe you could get on with the FBI." And so I said, "Wow, that would be awesome. I'd love the opportunity to work for the FBI. A lot of people, I think, would want to work for the FBI." So what I did is I was making more money in sales than I was full-time as a fireman. So I resigned from the firehouse, enrolled in school, still keeping my part-time gig at the flooring company, able to support our family. And 3 years into my college career, my mother-in-law says, "Hey, I want you to be the general manager of our company." And so I weighed, going to work for the FBI, who knows where they were going to tell us to live. And, there's some dangers there. We had kids at this time, or a son, a boy. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to go full fledged into the flooring world. It was a great business. We were doing over 13 million a year, one of the largest family owned flooring companies in the DFW area.
Wow.
So I said, there's a lot of opportunity there. Later, I was kind of recruited away, started my own flooring company. I really loved high-end hardwood floors. I wanted to make the beautiful floors that you would see like in the Louvre in France.
Right.
And so I actually went to France and studied how to make large paneled parquet wood floors. We were in a really nice area in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Keller, South Lake area, for those who are listening that know it. And many of the builders were putting the same hand-scraped hardwood floors that they were in a $200,000 home as they would a $1 million home.
Wow.
And I said, these homes deserve really beautiful floors. So went to France, learned how to make these large panel parquet wood floors. Designers ate it up. They wanted to tell their customers, oh, our flooring guy actually studied in France. And so I did that for a while. Later, one of my larger clients, Dalworth Restoration, I formed a relationship with them. One of the owner's son, he and I were about the same age. And I said, hey, who's doing your flooring? And they became one of my larger clients, not necessarily doing the high-end stuff, but that was my introduction into disaster restoration.
Right.
Working with their project managers every day, their estimators, going out, meeting them on job sites, starting to learn the industry, what ITEL was, why you need to come in budget, all those types of things. So fast forward a little bit more, they called and said, Justin, we enjoy our relationship with you. We want to merge or form a company together. And they were doing a huge business, over 30 million a year. And here I am trucking at about $1 million in flooring.
Yeah.
And so it was a tremendous opportunity. They're a 32-year-old company, household name. And of course I wanted to be part of that opportunity. So I did that for a couple of years. My wife and I opened a retail flooring store. We focused on the really high-end segment. So we did wool flooring. We did, of course, really high-end tile. We did really high-end wood floors, those types of things. So I was still able to do what I enjoyed, that little niche, but also have a retail floor company, a larger opportunity. So later was recruited away to become a consultant for the flooring industry. I sold my shares to my partners at Dalworth and became a consultant for the flooring industry. I'd fly around the US and Canada and go into flooring companies as small as, $500,000 up to $100 million and help them with business process, sales management, anything to do with the business with exception of running crews or helping them install floors better. So I did that for a while, and a disaster restoration company in Virginia Beach recruited me away. I went to work with them for a while. And I was director of sales and strategic planning with them. Managed the salespeople, estimators, and worked a little bit with project managers because the estimators and project managers were separate. Ultimately, we had to come together. Ultimately, we formed those two as a team. While we were doing that, Christy became a recruiter, and that just exploded. Yeah. The demand was there. The ability for her to find these candidates, she was good at what she did. So eventually she recruited me and said, hey, come work with me in this flooring gig or a recruiting gig. And we've been doing it now together for 7 years. But we've been working together actually longer. She actually works for me inside the flooring company as my bookkeeper. And yeah. So it's been a great time. We love working together. We really do.
That's awesome. Justin, No. You hit some really, really interesting things that I want to make sure we spend some time talking about. But first and foremost, was there always an entrepreneurial desire for you, like as a kid or something? I guess I want to start there. Did you always know or want to own your own business? Was that kind of the goal?
No, I didn't grow up in a household where there were entrepreneurs.
Okay.
My dad was a yard foreman for a large construction company, so it was a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday type gig, heavy equipment. So that's the household I really started in. My parents divorced, and then I really went from that to my mom married a space physicist.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, night and day. We were poor growing up, and then when we married the space physicist, he had a good living. I had new clothes. I had my own bedroom for the first time. So,
Yeah.
but again, he wasn't an entrepreneur. He was a scientist.
Right.
So he taught me, go to school, get good grades, get a good job somewhere. And
Yeah.
I don't believe in that at all. I don't even tell my own kids that today, right? I do believe in go to school and get good grades, but I don't believe in get a job, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I preach, hey, start your own gig if you have that desire. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with working with someone else at all. But if you have the ability to do it yourself, then might as well.
That kind of ties into my second question. When you talked about you were a firefighter paramedic, um, the pay is not great. And,
Right.
I know I have a family member that is a flight paramedic, and, the pay is never something that's super, super amazing, but there are some
Right.
ancillary benefits that, like great retirement, things like that. Was it a little scary for you to jump ship? I guess. I mean, you were thinking about jumping ship to go to the FBI, which also has great benefits, but kind of jumping into this family business, this flooring, was that a little scary for you to kind of leave the comfort and security of the firefighter paramedic thing?
Well, it really wasn't scary, except that I was leaving something I was passionate about. I really enjoyed.
Right.
I was the type of fireman who I didn't just show up to work and do the job. I knew why the fire trucks were red. I knew why we had Dalmatians in the firehouse.
Yeah.
I knew, I would go to old firehouses in Dallas Fort Worth and just look at how they were built and all the old haylofts upstairs, and look at the corners where the wagon wheels had banged against the side at one time, how long ago, stuff
That's
like
so
that. So
cool.
I loved that piece, and it was really tearing at me. Do I really want to leave this? Right.
Right.
So that was probably the biggest scary part for me. But I had such a track record of making good money that I wasn't worried about the money. I knew that,
Gotcha.
hey, I've proven myself. I have the ability to make good money doing this gig. So I wasn't worried about that piece at all.
How did you, so if it wasn't the money, then how did you overcome the passion thing, right? Like
Yeah.
it sounds like, I mean, you loved the history of it and
Yeah.
everything about firefighting. I guess, how did you
Yeah.
overcome that? Do you still have a hobby? Do you still go visit fire stations? I guess, how did you overcome that aspect of leaving that job?
Did I lose you?
Oh, just cut out just briefly. Okay.
There
You're
you go.
back. You're back.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. So I tend to really myself into things. And when I started getting into hardwood floors, I mean, really, I would be sanding a wood floor, me doing the work at the beginning stages in Dallas, in a home that was a rental,
Yeah.
and look at the floors and think about how many Christmases families had on this floor,
That's
and
cool.
just weird stuff like that. I don't know why, but just the history piece, maybe it was just very romantic to me, and bringing this floor back to life. I would think about the wood. Where did this wood come from? Was it Canada? Was it Wisconsin? Was it California? So I would really pour myself into these things, and really just try to be the expert, right? Not necessarily to do something for my client as much as for me. I just really enjoyed it.
That's cool. No, I was in my brain. I thought that was going to be your answer. And so it kind of worked out well that it was, but you're a passionate individual, and it wasn't necessarily wasn't necessarily firefighting specific. There was cool things about it, but you were passionate about the history, and there was something bigger picture there.
Right.
And it's always been really cool to me. I love being around people that are passionate, and I don't necessarily have to relate to them in any way, shape, or form. Right. Like my sister loves books, and I love books to an extent. I tend to find myself, I lean more to the nonfiction and the history, books. She just loves any kind of, fantasy or, story, like novels. She loves novels. And I don't necessarily relate to that, but I love that she loves that. And there's just something about the passion that I find really, really cool. And yeah, it sounds like you were able to, kind of rekindle that passion in the flooring industry, right? And finding something that you loved about that industry was, helped you, wake up every morning, I guess you could say.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally did. I was always an hour early to work. I was very curious about things. So yeah, I was very passionate about it.
That's cool. So you've kind of, you led up all the way to the formation of this recruiting company, Wylander, with your wife, with Christy. Her background in recruiting, she was really good at it. Obviously she recruited you. Let's talk a little bit about, I guess, today's day and age. Why, to get the big picture behind Wylander, why is recruiting and hiring so critically important? It sounds kind of like a dumb question, but I think it's a question that a lot of small business owners miss.
Right. Well, first of all, Wylander is our two sons, Rylan and Wyatt. So we came up with that name, right?
Wylander.
And
love it.
we wanted to provide a service that can obviously provide value to our clients. We never chased the dollar. We never chased something because it was a great financial opportunity, right? We own a bunch of apartments, and that's our investment, but I'm not building the apartments. I'm not rehabbing the apartments. I just give money to people that do that, right?
Yeah.
We enjoy recruiting because we can make a difference in people's business.
Yeah.
So many times we talk to owners who maybe hang on to a salesperson, hang on to a project manager, hang on to an estimator, and they don't realize that they're actually costing them money because they're just not performing, right?
Right.
So when we saw that our clients weren't necessarily good at interviewing, hey, we could provide value there. We could help you with that. When we found that our clients didn't know how to find people, hey, we could provide value there. We can help you do that, right? And listen, sure, there's a fee structure with our company. We're way below the national average. Most companies charge a minimum of 15%. We're a flat fee, not even close to that. So we could easily charge more, but we really love helping the smaller business owner achieve their goals and when we are able to find someone that makes a significant difference in their business, we're like, awesome. We're glad we were able to help them find that person. And then at the same time, the candidate, right?
Oh, yeah.
Many candidates are looking for a better opportunity. We've had a recruiter, Jackie Gingrich, for working with us for 6 years, I guess. And we recruited Jackie and she said, well, I'll give it a try, see how it goes. And about 2 months into it, she said, I thought I would enjoy this, and I am, but I never realized that I'd be making such an impact in people's lives, because she was finding people who needed a good job, finding a better job or better opportunity for them, and helping them change their lives. So it's more than just placing people.
Oh, yeah. And it's like you said, it's more than just helping the company that you're recruiting for. You're also helping those that are being recruited. You're helping people that are looking for a job. I'm going to say this statement, Justin. I want to see if you agree with me, because you're a hiring and recruiting expert. I have found with, I think this is going to be episode 24 of the podcast we've done. So we've been doing this for a few months now. Almost without fail, anybody that starts a business, they see significant growth within their business when they start delegating priorities to somebody else, when they bring in other people to help them. I've noticed that almost across the board. They start seeing significant growth when they bring in good people that can help them take some responsibilities off, right? We talk about wearing a lot of hats.
For sure.
They can start giving some of those hats to other people. Is that something that you've seen as well? Or am I off a little on that?
No, 100%. If you're not looking at your numbers, you're not growing with stability.
Yeah.
So, I see many owners have the full plate phenomenon, right? You go through the buffet line, you put everything on, and next thing you know, your things are starting to fall off.
Yeah.
That's a typical business owner not realizing, oh, my marketing is starting to fall off, or my customer service is starting to fall off, maybe my quality assurance or whatever. So that means it's time to bring people on, right? Hopefully you're looking at your numbers and you realize, oh, my break even is just this by adding one more person. Oh, I'm already doing that now. Why don't I add that person that allow me to fill more roles or to do whatever it is that they're wanting to do as their business, right?
Yeah,
for sure.
It's just something interesting that, I didn't necessarily notice before starting the podcast. And as I've had the opportunity to sit down with people that own businesses, large and small, it's been pretty consistent across the board. And yeah, I think you're right. Like, you have to do it correctly. You have to do it so that the numbers make sense. But that's a great analogy too, that as things start to fall, as you start dropping some things that shouldn't be dropped, that's when you know, okay, I've got to bring in some people to help me. And it might just be one person, and it might not be, and to kind of spin off that analogy, let's say marketing is one of the things that drops. Mm-hmm. Maybe you don't need to hire someone to do marketing, but maybe you need to hire someone to do something else so that you can pick up marketing, right? Sometimes you have to get a little creative with it. It's not always the thing that's suffering that you need to hire for. So yeah, maybe you don't need to hire a marketing person. Maybe you need to hire someone to help with your customer service so you can take time in your day away from customer service to focus on marketing. So and knowing that as a business owner, probably depends on the situation that they're in, but it's a phenomenon that I've noticed, and I've seen this pattern that people are like, man, when I hired 2 or 3 people, our revenue doubled the next year. And it's like, yeah, I mean, because you were able to focus your mind on other things. So
yeah, really, you open the funnel. We're a funnel, and this is us, the owners down at the bottom. Yeah. And when we hire people, that opens up the funnel more and more. So more is able to flow through the pipe. So that's how I look at it. That's how I explain it to owners and say, look, you're the bottleneck here. You're the problem. You're prohibiting your growth.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's it costing you not to have this person?
Yeah. Yeah. Cause it's easy to say, well, this person's going to cost me, $10 an hour or whatever. And I don't know if I can afford that, but you're right. Looking at it in the inverse, what is it costing you to not hire this person? Probably more than what you think it is. But oftentimes, that number is probably a little more difficult to track. Recruiting and hiring, something that we've mentioned multiple times on the podcast. It's probably a little earlier on in the episodes. Katie mentioned it in her episode, but also Eric from Blue Collar Nation. Disc personalities and why those are so important. Justin, I know you guys at Wylander are huge on DISC and personality tests and how that factors into hiring. Why is understanding DISC personality so important?
Well, the short answer is it's a superpower. Yeah. If you have the opportunity to have a superpower, why not have it? Right. Yeah. If I could choose my superpower, it'd be flying. My 14-year-old Wyatt asks me all the time, Dad, what would your superpower? And I said, it's flying. It's flying. I got my pilot's license a couple of years ago, and I love flying, and I'd love to fly without a plane and just through the air. But so DISC is a superpower. When you have the ability to understand yourself, but also understand the person you're talking to in a much more intimate, detailed manner, rather than having to spend a lot of time and reading them like a book, just looking at the way they're dressed, DISC can allow you to come really close, if not spot on the person's personality. And when you understand their personality, their tendencies are they're going to act a certain way, they're going to respond a certain way, they are going to have natural strengths, areas of opportunity. We don't call them weaknesses.
Yeah.
So if you have that ability, why not do it? Absolutely. Huge fan of DISC.
Huge fan. And to be honest with you, Justin, I was a non-believer. I thought personality quizzes were bogus up until I, got hired on here at Spot On Solutions, and I have had some really cool interactions with people and conversations with Katie. Because Katie's also, DISC certified now.
Right.
She's been able to kind of coach me through, well, this is how you communicate with people, and this is how you could better communicate with people. And my eyes have been open to how it works. This is probably a bigger question. Why DISC and not any of the dozens of other personality tests like type A, type E, red, blue, green? Like why use DISC instead of the others?
Part of that is that's what I was introduced to. Okay. When I owned my flooring company, we hired a consultant, worked for as a consultant. He introduced me to DISC, and it was easy for me to understand. It was applicable to my business, and it was a quick assessment for my people. I think, in our industry, DISC works great. We're not building rocket ships like my stepdad was, right?
Yeah.
I don't think DISC, I mean, I know his personality, and that tells me a lot about him. He's an engineer type.
Yeah.
And so I could find a good fit for him in the world. But as far as him doing his job, there's going to be something else that he's going to have to take. It's not going to just be DISC. But no, in our industry, DISC works very well. When we can tell or explain to a business owner why the person in his accounting department sucks,
Gotcha.
It's like, dude, they're not detail oriented. You need someone detail oriented in your accounting department. I know they're your sister-in-law and she's done administrative jobs in the past, but she really needs to be in sales, right?
Yeah.
She's telling everybody in your office about your numbers because that's her natural gift. She loves to talk and tell people about things.
Yep.
So that's why she should be in sales and someone else should be doing your books.
Really cool. Yeah. Things like that, I think, also open my eyes up to what good companies are and good organizations are. Katie's such a believer in DISC that, and I think all good companies should run this way. When there's someone that's not filling a role well, when there's exactly the analogy that you've explained, when somebody's not doing the job that you originally hired them to do, Katie doesn't say, okay, well, let's fire him. Let's move on. Katie says, what role could we possibly have that person fill somewhere else within the company? Or how can we change their job description that better reflects their personality? Yeah. And it just opened my eye because, and maybe it's because I worked in more toxic environments. I don't know, but maybe some of the other places that I worked, does that person work there? Nope. Okay. We'll see you later. And for Katie, it's just completely different. And I think it's because of her understanding of DISC personality. She says, well, can we find a role here that works better for them and helps them be better? So it works great with that analogy that you explained. Your sister-in-law might not be good at the accounting, but she's awesome. She would be awesome at sales because of her personality. So let's move her over to sales. Let's find somebody else to be an accountant.
Yeah. So I did a presentation at Contractor Connection. I guess it was 2019.
Okay.
And the title of it was The Right Person in the Wrong Seat.
Yeah.
Right. So we had the right person. We had someone who bought into the company. We liked them. They got along with people. They just weren't good at their job. Well, 85% of someone's success is if they're likable or not.
Yeah.
So let's not can the person. Let's figure out where we can fit them inside of our company. However, what's right for the company may not be right for the individual.
Yeah.
So we have to eventually make a business decision.
Yep. Totally.
So if you're a business owner and you have someone in accounting who's just not making it, but they'd be great in sales, but you're covered in sales, you can't afford another salesperson.
Right.
It's time to recommend that they work for someone else, and you give them a great referral letter.
Yep. Totally. It's awesome. The other flip side to personalities, which is the other, I think, part of what you guys do at Wylander, is recruitment. And we've kind of, it's not just hiring, it's also keeping those good employees. How can DISC help, or understanding DISC personalities help business owners have higher recruitment, keep their employees for longer?
Yeah. So one thing that we caution our owners on is, if you sit in my 1 hour class through DISC, right? I teach a 1 hour class of DISC, and you sit through that class, you will have a much better understanding of DISC, but you're not the DISC messiah, as Dr. Rome would say, right? So many of us sit through that 1 hour class. We're like, oh, I got it figured out. I know everything that there is to know about DISC, and I'm going to change everything in my company. So we have to be careful, because understanding DISC is really understanding ourselves first, right? Once we understand ourselves first and realize the type of glasses we're wearing, how we see the world, right? D, I, S, or C, then we need to realize, okay, are my responses, say I'm a D, which I am, are my responses such that an S personality, I've cornered them so they can only respond a certain way, right? Because I'm such a dictator, I'm such a bully, I'm such a mean guy, right? That's what people think D personalities are, that I've cornered this personality that they can only respond a certain way. So when these owners understand themselves and that maybe they've created a mess, right?
Yep.
Things literally change overnight when they go into someone's office and say, I owe you an apology. I didn't realize how much of a dictator I was. Yes, I own the company. I ultimately make all the decisions, and my feet are held accountable, and my name's at the note at the bank. But I need good people. You're a great person. And from now on, if I'm rude, please call me on it. You have that ability. I want to let you know that you can call me out anytime, right? Because the D's personality isn't necessarily to be a dictator. He's just task oriented, right? He wants to get it done. He's not worried about feelings, where other people are all about feelings.
Yep.
So when they understand themselves, then they start to understand people around them. What can you not do, right? What can you not accomplish when you've got that superpower?
It really is a superpower. I think you described it perfectly. I hadn't thought of it like that, but it's something I'm trying to get better at. It's one of my goals for the year. We sat down at my 1 year, we sat down in my yearly review with my supervisors and with Katie. And one of my goals for the next year is to get better at DISC and better understand my role within Spot On Solutions, but how I can just better interact with people around me. Because
I'm happy to help.
Well, exactly. Justin, and you're a great resource for this, because, even little things, I had a great conversation with my supervisor, Maggie, and I love Maggie is the best. And she spoke to me a little bit about how, I interact with her. One of the ways that I interact with her, which I didn't even notice, but how she perceives that. She's like, it makes me feel like you don't, respect my authority. And it was eye-opening for me to be like, wow, that's something I don't even notice myself doing.
Right.
And it was great for me to know, okay, I need to be better at how I communicate with Maggie, with X, Y, and Z, so that she knows that I value her opinion. I value who she is, and her role is, she's our, my pod leader. It helps me. It was just really, really eye opening to know. Okay.
And you can't understate that, because in a typical work environment, when you're not utilizing something like DISC, that tool, you just have this relationship that starts to fester. It starts to be a blister, and then it's an infection. And then ultimately somebody's got to go. Right.
Yeah.
All because of a misunderstanding.
Right.
So dude, that's awesome. That's really powerful stuff. It really is.
Well, and it's just, something I didn't even know. And I think DISC does this, but also just, being part of a positive, healthy work environment.
Right.
I think in a past life, which, I'm not, I sound like I'm that old, but in my younger years, I could have taken what she said and been like, oh, I didn't even notice I was doing that. So it's not my fault. It's Maggie's fault because she's taking something that I don't mean, you know what I mean? But because of the positive work environment that I live in, and because of my understanding of DISC, I'm like, wow, you're right. I need to be doing this differently and be better. And it makes me want to be ultimately a better person and
awesome.
And help my interaction. So I wanted to hit it. That's just one example that I've noticed in my own life. And it's one of my goals for the next year to try and be better at it. So be expecting some emails, as I go forward. So
absolutely.
Before we kind of keep going, I have a couple bigger picture questions about Wylander and you and Christy and how you guys run the business. But before we kind of move on from this disc and everything about it, if you could sum everything up, what do you think is the most important thing you wish business owners knew about what you guys do at Wylander? What do you think, if you could sum it all up into one elevator pitch, what would be the one thing that you wish business owners knew about what you guys do?
Wow. I would say it's probably that we're industry specific.
Yeah.
We attend trade shows. We attend probably 9-ish trade shows a year.
Yeah.
Every single trade show, someone walks up and says, "Do you guys recruit for our industry?"
Yeah.
And we sure do. We're industry specific. We know what Xactimate is. We know what program work is, and yada yada yada. Right.
Yeah.
So I don't want to be a smart ass and say, "Well, what do you think I'm doing here?"
Yeah.
but yes, we're restoration industry specific. My problem isn't finding clients. We've got a ton of clients. Our problem is finding candidates. So that's part of our strategy in the next coming years or months, probably years.
Yeah.
Unless the job market really changes, which I doubt it will. It's just finding more and more candidates.
Yeah, it's really cool. Well, that's awesome. I'm happy about our partnership with you guys, and I know that a lot. We talk to a lot of our clients about you guys and what you do, and it's a challenge that a lot of my clients are facing right now. Is how can we get good quality candidates into our hiring pipeline? I spoke with a client in Florida actually the other day that he says, we have we're getting lots of applications filled out, but I cannot get people to show up to interviews. And it's just such an interesting, today's day and age, it's just hiring has just changed. And
and I'll
finding quality candidates is hard.
Yeah. Since COVID, we've had more no-shows than we can count. Something about COVID, the no-shows began. We're talking about people who do our screening. That's an hour invested in their time. Then we submit them to the client. The client reviews the screening and the resume that we submitted. We call the candidate back and say, "Hey, great news. The client would like to interview you." "Great, I'll be there tomorrow at 3. Perfect. It's all set up. 3:00 comes, no show. Wow. It's ridiculous the amount that happens. We're trying to wrap our head around it. We've never had a dynamic like this. So we're really trying to say, why would someone invest the time that they've invested with us and then just do a no-show?
And then
it's weird. And obviously they're not returning our texts and phone calls and emails after that. And then we're saying, well, that was a blessing in disguise, but there sure are a lot of blessing in disguises lately.
It's frustrating. Well, it's good to know that, experts in the field like you guys are also seeing the same trend, that my clients aren't, they're not on an island. They're
definitely not alone. Yeah.
They're not alone, which is good to know. There are people out there that are experiencing the same thing. And it's just something we have to continue to find ways to deal with these days.
Yeah.
So, without moving too far forward, I wanted to talk a little bit about starting and operating a business with your spouse. We a few episodes ago, we had Len Hume and Annette Marchanda onto the podcast, and they operated a really successful cleaning company in Canada for nearly 20 years. And their husband and wife, and they talked about the dynamic and what it was like to run a business together and how they were able to kind of face those challenges. What has it been like running a business with you and Christy? And how do you separate home life and work life? How do you make sure that you can go home and just be husband and wife at the end of the day?
Yeah. So I've been asked this question before.
Yeah.
Friends or other people who are thinking about starting their business and contemplating doing it with their wife. And, it's really interesting to me when I meet someone and they say, "Oh, I could never work with my wife." Right.
Yep.
And I'm like, it's really interesting because I can't imagine not working with my wife. So fortunately, our disc personalities are that we attract, right? So opposites attract, but we also worked extremely well together based on our disc personality. Jerry Akari, a gentleman in Boston who owned a really nice high-end flooring company when I was back in my flooring days. I was up in Boston and we were sitting down in his showroom, beautiful showroom, really nice part of Boston. And he looked at me and he says, "How's it going with your wife?" And it was a sincere question. He was, we weren't talking about business anymore. He was like, "How's it going with your wife?" And I said, "Jerry, it's been great. I enjoy working with her and she enjoys working with me. And, we don't ever have confrontation at home or at work. And honestly, we really never fight. We hardly ever fight. Not to say we haven't, but we hardly ever do." And he says, "So I'm going to give you some advice." I was like, "Okay." And he says, when people tell you to have a work life and a home life and you work together, he says, that's bullshit. It's not going to happen.
Yep.
Right. He says, so what you can do, and it's worked well for him and his wife, and they were 20 years in at the time, or 30 years. He says, you have to respect each other, that if one individual says, "Hey, I don't want to talk about work right now," you're done. You don't talk about work for the rest of the evening. Right. So we've adopted that and 100% still use that today. If we're out at dinner, which we're always talking about work, right?
Yep, always.
We go to dinner, and on our way to dinner, we're talking about placements or talking about a recruiter or talking about a client. And if someone says, "You know what, I don't want to talk about work right now," we always respect that. And we turn the work switch off and we talk about our family, or we talk about whatever it is we're going to do that evening. So that's been the key for us. And it's been awesome.
That's cool. That's a key that I think more of my more of our listeners and people that own small businesses with their spouse, I think that's something they can relate to even better, because like you said, it's hard to shut it off when you own a small business and it's maybe just a couple of you running a whole company. It's it can be hard to be like, well, it's 5:00, but we still have emails and phone calls to make, and we got a meeting, we got a dinner meeting with a client. Like, it's hard to just be able to shut it off. And I think that's a better rule to live by, that somebody says they want to stop talking about it, you stop talking about it.
And he said, it's okay to talk about it. It's part of your life. It's what you do. It's your well-being. It's what pays your bills. It's what sends us to Europe when we go to Europe. Right.
Yeah.
So it's okay. And you both have to say, oh, it is okay to talk about work all the time. Right. Because we eat, sleep, and breathe it.
Right.
But when the other one says, "You know what, I'm done for the night talking about work." Okay, cool. Let's talk about whatever.
Let's talk about something else. Yeah. Gosh, that's great. That's a great rule to live by, Justin. I didn't want to take too much of your time talking about that, because your time is valuable right now. But I really appreciate you hitting on that. That's a great rule to live by.
Thanks,
Justin. I want to end with the three big questions that I always ask everybody that comes on the podcast. You've given us some great insights today on you and your life, and kind of some keys that I think that'll really help people as they go to hire and recruit employees in today's day and age. So I kind of wanted to end on the three big questions that I ask everybody. So first and foremost, what's a book or podcast that you're reading or listening to right now that you really love?
So on my way to the gym and while I work out, I listen to Blinkist. It's a short cliff notes, if you will, of a bunch of different books, everything from history to entrepreneurship or whatever, you name it. You can find the subject. I like to listen to Blinkist. I like listening to music sometimes, but most of the time I'm listening to a Blinkist, right? But as far as the book that I'm currently reading is The Creature from Jekyll Island. And it's about the founding members of kind of our finance system, the Fed of the U.S. government, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really eye-opening how, for lack of better words, how that's kind of a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
So that's the book I'm reading, and kind of the Blinkist stuff. Yeah.
That's really cool. You're a man after my own heart, Justin. I end up reading mostly nonfiction.
Yeah.
Generally, yeah, like a lot of history stuff. I like,
Uh-huh.
Western United States history. So the history of
Yeah.
Idaho, where I'm from and stuff. That sounds
Cool.
really, really interesting. So that's cool.
Yeah, it's very eye-opening.
Um, okay. Second question. We talked a little bit about, running a business with your spouse and how it's hard to kind
Yeah.
of shut it off. But when you get to the end of a long day, how do you relax or recharge when you're running around trying to run a business and talking with clients, whatever it might be? How do you relax at the end of
Yeah.
the day?
So I honestly try to watch the news.
Okay.
If I'm able to watch the evening news, it really pulls my mind away. Whatever's going on in the world, it takes my mind there.
Yeah.
There's something that we have called white space in our brains and our heads, and we don't access that without an extended period of time in rest. And so typically for me, that's Sunday. Sundays are by far my most creative days. I've had a day of rest Saturday, and then I go into white space on Sunday, provided that I'm not working or challenging my brain that way.
Right.
So when we go into white space, we're able. That's why we get the big ideas in the shower, right? Because we're not
Right.
doing
Okay.
anything. Our
Cool.
brain is relaxed. We go into white space while we're taking a shower. So Sundays are great, but I love going into the woods. My wife's family has a lake house up in Wisconsin, and almost immediately my brain goes into white space, able to
That's
figure
cool.
out challenges, think about new service offerings, different ways of doing things. So being in the woods, surrounded by nothing but trees, really, it's like a quick way to get into white space.
Oh, that's cool. White space is a concept that I have just recently been introduced to, and it's really, really cool. It
Awesome.
really does. The best ideas that I have really do come from moments like that.
Yeah.
For me, it's always been fishing for whatever reason.
Okay. Yeah.
I find
Yeah.
myself that I can really shut my brain off, which is weird
Yeah.
because fishing requires a lot of focus.
Right.
Especially the kind of fishing that I do. And so it's interesting that it almost allows my brain to kind of, go into that white space mode, and I can just think and think of ideas for work or business or whatever it might be. And it's really, really cool. That's
You're
cool
letting go, if you're fly fishing, which it sounds like you might be, there's a lot into it. And so you're really focused on that. And then it allows your brain to release. And then when you go back to it or something comes to you, it's like, oh, yeah, that's why didn't I think of that earlier?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
Okay. Last question.
Yep.
Justin, and it's kind of a big one. So feel free to yell at me and tell me that you should have had more time to prepare for this. But if you could rewind to the beginning of it all, whether it's the beginning of Wylander or the beginning of your career in the flooring industry, whatever it might be, if you could rewind to the beginning and tell younger Justin one thing, what would that be?
It would probably be stay focused longer. It's so easy to get distracted and try other things, or get distracted and maybe look at doing something else. Staying focused is proven to be a huge thing. We're always studying other people, and hopefully we're wanting to be like someone who's doing better than us, right?
Yeah.
And doing better doesn't necessarily have to do with money, but in this scenario that I'm going to describe, it does. I've found that the richest people I know did what they did for a really long time. It isn't that they did it for 5 years and now they're worth half a billion.
Right.
They did it for 25, 30 years and now they're worth half a billion. Granted, those individuals have some blind spots. They don't have much of a home life. Their wife raised their kids. They were around, but not necessarily a father figure. So that doesn't work for me. But staying focused, I would say, if I could go back to my younger self, maybe I would stay in the fire department, right? I love what I do now, but I could easily finish that career. I look at my peers, guys that I was sitting next to at the firehouse, and they're becoming battalion chiefs and fire chiefs and
Yeah.
And I think about myself, oh, I wonder if I would have been a good fire chief, you know? So I'm very pleased where I am. I love working with my wife and the business we've created. So I'm staying focused on Wylander.
That's really cool. A couple episodes ago, we had Jeremy Reitz on the podcast, and his big theme for that podcast was adapting to change. But he said adapting to change is great, but he says what's even better is focusing on what makes you great. And focusing on those things. So he said, be willing to adapt to change when it comes to you, but find the things that you're good at and focus on them and double down on them. And I think that kind of hits on similarly what you've said. And, you know, focus a little longer on those things that you're good at and that are important in your life. And I think,
my wife's email tagline says, I can't control the direction of the wind, but I can control my sails.
That's
so
awesome.
That goes back to what Jeremy, who's a great guy, goes back to what he's saying, right? We can't control everything that comes at us, but we can control how we respond, right? Yep. And become a better version by those responses and focus on what we did right.
Oh, it's great. Justin, you're awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been great to meet with you and sit down and chat about your insights into owning a business and hiring and recruiting. And we could have spent much more time talking about all the other things that you and Christy are doing right now, but I'm really just happy that you were able to come on and talk a little bit with us today.
Hey, man, I'm happy to do it. I love SOS. You guys have always been great to us as well. The services you even do, you know, our SEO and our web stuff. And yeah, we're very pleased with you guys and send you as much business as we can.
Oh, you're awesome, Justin. And I hope to maybe have you on in the future and we can talk about some more things, but really appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks, Justin.
All right. Take care, man. Thank you for the opportunity.
This has been Success Elevated, making you a little bit better one show at a time. Thanks for joining us. Subscribe on any major podcast platform or check out our website at successonpoint.com.